Um, okay, all right. Which one of you wants to go first?
Jen, you're on top on my screen, so why don't you take charge?
Okay, I'll go first. To introduce myself, hi, I'm Jen.
Hi, Jen.
They, them pronouns. Hello. I don't know, I've been working as a software developer since maybe like 2016, 2017-ish. Like got bachelor's in cognitive science, then went to web development boot camp at App Academy. From there was like a front end developer at an agency, then went and did the Recur Center, which I highly recommend, and used that to kind of pivot into data eng. So that's my next job. I did data eng at VSCO. After that, I decided I wanted to be more kind of like generalist backend. So I was that at Cockroach Labs for about 2 years, most recently. This job search was definitely like a more difficult job search than my last one. There just seemed to be like less opportunities. And also I was looking for only remote roles. So that kind of like limited my options as well. But I'm really happy to be joining Weights and Biases soon, which I found through Leopard. So thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit about the studying you did and what worked and what didn't and how you kind of iterated there?
Sure. Yeah. So I definitely like improved at interviewing the more interviews I did. Before starting, I did spend some time just like doing a leak code or two per day in Python, which I hadn't like used for a while. So I was also brushing up on that because it's the language I like to use for algorithms questions. And there are like a lot of guides online for system design interviews. Like I know Leopard has like a list of them. So just like reviewing those, kind of like trying to do self-practice system design things. Also, something I like to do while working is kind of keep a document of projects that I've worked on and just like a little overview of them because I do not remember stuff that I've worked on like a year after it's happened. So I had that for VSCO. I wasn't able to put that together as well for Cockroach because I was laid off and like lost access, but I kind of like reassembled it through talking to old coworkers.
What did it look like? Was it just a list of bullets or like tell us more about the template? We should make our own template and give people something similar.
Sure. So for each kind of like project that I worked on, I would have like whether I was the lead or like what my role was, kind of like the context of why the project was happening, the major like components of it, the technology used, and just kind of like notes about it, like anything of interest, because hiring managers sometimes ask like, oh, what was like a challenge for this project? Or like, so kind of like preempting questions that come up in those interviews. And then before I would have like a describe past projects interview, I'd go review my past project notes to kind of like have it fresh. I also wrote a blog post at one point at VSCO, and that has proven so useful because I just like reread it before interviews so that I remember things that I've worked on. And then sometimes I'll like link it to the hiring manager, and that they always seem happy about that.
Would you mind posting that in our Slack, that blog post? Because I think it's such a good idea that people should do. I have often told people to go look at the company blog of where they work or where they used to work and look for ideas as like product launches and stuff. But it's like that idea is so good on so many levels. People can have things they can put on their LinkedIn and in their resume and also have that reminder kind of all in one. Love it. What do you think the hardest part of this past job search was? Perfect.
I feel like I think I'm at kind of a awkward point between like mid-level and senior. Like it could really go either way depending on the company. So I feel like I was less competitive for senior roles, but those were most of the roles that were like being posted. So especially towards the beginning when I hadn't like done enough interviews to be good at interviewing, I was getting feedback that was just like that I interpreted as being like outcompeted by other candidates. So that was a difficult element. only
That's
looking,
everybody.
yeah, also
leopard
only
neck.
looking for remote roles. I got like
Yeah,
a few, maybe like 3 or 4 messages from companies that seemed like remote might be okay, and that was saying like actually they weren't hiring remote at the moment. So
that sucks.
yeah.
Do you think that, I know with weights and biases, we talked about this before and you were nervous to do it, but you had some really good overlap with the work you had done before and the work you've done, or the work that you did in your last role versus the work that they needed. Can you talk about how you thought about that and how you sort of highlighted it at the final stages, but also through the interview process to like be the most qualified candidate for them?
Sure. So I've worked with like authorization and authentication systems in the past at my last role and was unaware that that's a niche, but it seems to be, because that is something that the role at Weights and Biases was like specifically looking for. So I made sure to just like highlight that experience repeatedly during the interviews and in the negotiation stage after they gave an offer, or like while they're preparing the offer, we made sure to really like highlight that it would be difficult to find someone else
You're
with
like,
that same
please
experience.
don't make me do it.
Yeah.
It's one line. Do it.
Yeah.
And it ended up working out. So,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit more about what that meant to like highlight it through the interview process?
Sure. Anytime they meant, well, I would ask like what the team was working on or some challenges that they had. And anytime I like noticed something that was similar to something I'd worked on in the past, or even that my like team in general had touched in the past, I would make sure to mention that and note that that seemed like an interesting problem and sounded similar to X. And some feedback that I got from the recruiter was that it had been difficult to find candidates with like that specific experience. So I tried to take advantage of that knowledge.
Totally. Any advice come to mind as you were thinking about coming and chatting with the community of stuff you wish you did differently or knew sooner when you started interviewing?
Yeah, for my first few interviews, I wish I had just prepared more, like reviewed my project list more and kind of prepared for the questions that are like, what's a hard bug you found? Because I just didn't have examples ready and like it made me nervous. So yeah, just like to overly prepare for all types of interviews, I suppose. Even the like recruiter screens sometimes ask about past projects. It's good to just have them like ready, top of mind.
Totally. This is awesome. Allie, Gautam, any other questions for Jenn before we switch over?
If you haven't worked for a senior developer position and you didn't get to make like architectural decisions, what do you explain about the role?
Mm.
So you are just an individual contributor and you got your tasks from a senior or a staff developer. So how do you navigate that?
I think this might be I'd be interested to hear what Allie would say because I think you have a bit more like experience than I do, but I tried to frame stuff like that as like I understood the context of why I was doing the task, and here is all of the context for the problem, and like let me describe the architecture and where I may have contributed in discussions, even if I wasn't like leading it.
Okay. I admittedly was thinking of my own question that I was going to ask Jenn, so I'm going to have you put that in the chat, and then I'll answer that after my
Jenn asked
question.
Allie.
Yeah, so I was going to ask.
Allie's question.
Yeah, I was going to ask what was kind of the most common question that sort of came up either in like hiring screening or in like tech interviews that you found either odd or annoying. And my example of this as someone who is full stack but leans more front end was the question that I received the most was type a URL into the browser and hit enter and tell me exactly what happens at every level. And I hated that question because as a front end developer, I'm like, oh, I can talk about page loads and paints and all of this stuff, but like, I don't know, DNS and servers. So that was something that like after the second or third time, I was like, oh, I need to study this. I'd be curious to know if there was a similar kind of repetitious question that came out that was hot topic?
It's a good question.
Ooh, I don't think I really had a question, like a kind of trivia question like that come up much. But something that has, I always think like, oh, I don't need to like make myself remember recursion for the algorithms interviews because like really rarely use that in real life. But at each onsite, it's like come up actually, and I'm like, okay, I'm glad that I like took a minute to like do a practice problem. Um, but I find those annoying because I'm like, I try to avoid using that in production code.
Yeah, I think that's also a good like culture signifier when that comes up early, and especially when it's like I'm applying for a front end job and you're asking me about the structure of the internet. It's often
Yeah.
for what kind of role they want or at least used to asking about.
Totally. This was awesome. Thanks so much, Jen. I think this recording is going to be really useful for people. And the positioning stuff. It's something we talk about all the time, and yet hearing concrete examples of positioning is really helpful, I think. Okay, can we move on to Allie? Thank you again, by the way. Yes, really appreciate it. Okay, Allie, I'm pinning you now.
Yeah.
You do just a quick intro and a little bit about your job search, and then we'll jump into questions.
Yeah, I'm Allie Wehrman. I'm based in St. Louis, Missouri, so middle of the country. We do not have a tech scene. It kind of exists, but it's a very boring tech scene. And I want to do fun tech stuff. I guess I'm coming up on like a decade or so experience. I have like a traditional CS degree, but it's from a liberal arts university in the middle of Missouri. So it's like people like the degree, but then they're like, I don't know what it's used for. And what it's useful for is that I like to talk and communicate a lot. And so I come pre-baked with soft skills. So while I really was attracted to all the bedtime computer science stories of my degree, actual programming really happened for me on the job. I kind of did some side like executive assistant stuff for a few years, then went into project management, and then was like, I'd be a better programmer here as I'm fixing all of your bugs in a project manager, and got in through the like very old school C#.NET days where nothing was fun or sexy and everything was a paycheck and a learning lesson and how to get along with grumpy senior developers. And that skill has been useful over the years. I've worked in a variety of companies, both like really small and really big and corporate, and then like bootstrap, we don't know what we're doing startup, to like, hey, we kind of know what we're doing. Oh, we're going to grow really rapidly startup. So I've tasted a lot of everything and I've tried on a lot of different hats, and I kind of at this point know what I really like to do and what I really don't like to do, and kind of the environments in which I flourish and help people around me flourish, and those that I don't want to fucking work at anymore. So I left my last startup, Dutchie, in November, which was about 6 months ago-ish, something like that. And Dutchie was the most amazing place for 3.5 years. We went through some really big leadership changes with our co-founders getting kicked out and a bunch of drama, and I just decided to leave. It was getting too much for my mental health. I wanted a really chill, cool environment. So this was a bad macroeconomic time to just like leave your job, but I did it anyway. And I highly recommend taking 6 months off every 6 years. Like that's been just a really nice mental break, and it's kind of helped bring my best self to interviews and go through this very fun, albeit challenging job market right now.
Totally. I definitely want to hear about your study prep stuff, but generally, I think you took your time a little bit more in your job search. You got to be thoughtful, and I would love to hear more about your thinking there and your process of deciding what was worth your time and not.
Yeah, I mean, I think I left definitely with the intention of like, I need a little bit of a break. I have a long-running side project that I like to work on, and that's like the thing that always brings me joy in programming and learning new things and getting like playfully stuck. So I just wanted to kind of like work on something and just like kind of focus my intentions back on that and like really spend my time like falling back in love with what I do, because you know, I've worked at a lot of different places. You don't always choose your coworkers or your management structures or, you know, the things you get to work on. And as you grow in your career, you do, which is the good news. But you know, the thing we're here to do all day is like that there is joy to it, and I'm not ready to be kicked out of the field yet for it. So I really focused on just like, hey, I want to like focus on some corners of my side project, and I'll casually talk to a couple of people from Leopard, and you know, kind of casually go through my network and my inbox, and really took the first few months just kind of take a couple companies at a time at the beginning of the month, kind of go through their process, realize, oh yeah, just like Jen, like I should actually prepare for this. Like this isn't like 2020 where you can just kind of roll up and be like, hey, I can communicate and I can write JavaScript and like I know how to, you know, schedule meetings and show up, and that's like the entire job. So this was a little bit more preparation, like, yeah, not just from my side project pool, but like from my last job or even my prior job. What are the big projects that I've worked on? What are the challenges about that? How did I direct difficult relationships? There's lots of questions around that. Kind of just taking a couple afternoons and open a new tab in Sublime Text, just kind of brainstorm some things. It doesn't have to be really thought out or well edited, just kind of chunk the big ideas, and you know, you kind of get used to the repetition as those questions come up to refine your answers, and you know, it becomes an elevator pitch over time. So definitely some of those like just communication brainstorming exercises. Like I'm not a leak code girly. I hate that. I find it boring. It does not give me joy, so I do not do it. That's why I have a side project. I generally avoided any sort of like probably 90% of interviews that were like, oh, we want you to do a dumb leak code thing. I was like, no, I'd rather prefer take home, or even better, since I've got this GitHub repository of all of this code, it's nice when you can take a side project and steer the interview, because I've done interviews on both sides and it's hard and people don't know what to ask. So if you can show up and be like, hey, I'm proficient in this, here's a link, here's a really cool project. Like, you want a complicated state management example? Go right here. Like, do you want to know how I addressed re-renders even though I'm using context? Like, look at this particular commit. You know, that's something that like, I think when you can convey joy and excitement and like communication around something that like is right in front of you, that goes a long way, you know. Some people are really good at the leak code, just like some people are very good at passing SAT scores, and the other people excel in different ways. So like, find what you're good at and what you're passionate about, and like find the ways to highlight and steer questions towards that, you know, because sure, I can like watch some videos of the event loop and common things that they ask you and brush up and prep those answers, but you know, 5 weeks later, I've forgotten most of my answers for them. It comes and goes. It is a muscle that you have to do a little bit of prep, but like if you can point to locally complicated things and explain it in a cheerful manner that can apply to an 8-year-old, then like that's half the job there. And I think the other main thing that I really found was like interviewing is a vibe check. I am looking at smaller places, kind of where I am in my career. I want to grow teams and make them fun and diverse. And you know, you really do get a sense of who you are working for when you talk to them. If they're you know, a certain type of black and white communicator where it is, this is the checklists that I want. Like, I really want to work there. You know, I want to have, can I have a communication with either the co-founder or the hiring person, you know, or the product person? If I can talk to product people as a software engineer, those are my favorite people to talk to. I think they should be in every interview, because that's the relationship I think that is often most important, is like, hey, can I challenge you on questions and like get details, and like, how do you think about like accessibility or like hover states or like design systems? Like, I want to make sure that relationship is really like fluid and communicative up front, because that's going to be a sign of like it's a good team fit, you know. And like, if I have to pick up a programming language or a pattern or whatever, like I can. And if I have to do that all in the song and dance and a take home, like that's great. Give me a take home. I will do the song and dance, and then we can do a code review together. Other random notes on that, I found just doing Loom videos of like, give yourself a code review on your take homes. Like, I always included one, which was like, if there's any sort of installation, I know I did a couple with Jaunt that I accepted the offer. I did a whole like Docker setup and like a Flask API and a Next setup. So there was a couple steps of installation. So I wanted to make sure that I walked through the installation step, right? Because that's always the most frustrating part, especially when things go wrong, you know. I wanted to include a short video of, hey, this is a demo of the thing you asked me to build. This is the thing. Here's the drop down, press the button, does the thing. And then I did kind of a video of a code review of the back end and a video of the code review of the front end, just like I would if I was getting on a Zoom. Hey, these were the assumptions I made. Ooh, actually, now that I'm thinking about this, this could be renamed to be, you know, more communicative. I use this library because of X, Y, or Z, or I skipped because of this. Just kind of getting all of those thoughts out in like a 3 to 5 minute video is super helpful. And for the most part, you can do it in the free version of Loom, but it will cut you off. So, you know, maybe it's worth the $12 for the premium.
That's so good. So many good chunks of info there. I like wanted to double click on how you encouraged that you said steer with the side project, and I just wanted you to tell like
Yeah.
my question was just when did that come up? But Jen also has a good question around, do you have any advice for screening potential managers and coworkers? So let's cover both of those in 3 minutes and then be done. First,
okay.
how to steer, then coworkers.
How and when do you steer? I think as soon as possible. I lead with it to some extent as my, you know, because it's weird that like I left my job. That's always the like, why did you quit your job? And you can't be like, because it slowly broke my heart over a year. And I'm just like that's not very convincing. So you say, oh, you know, I left because I wanted to work on, you know, being my own product manager and work on steering my own product goals. And I've got this cool thing that touches on all these similar stacks to yours, and you can kind of lead with that then. And as a crutch, even if you're pair programming, and you know, the worst part about pair programming for me is just the like 7 minutes where my brain has to read the question 4 times and be like, gotcha. Okay, now we can talk. So often I will, in lieu of just staring in silence for 7 minutes, I will try to distract with a question and say, oh, this seems similar to something I've done here. Maybe I can offload and get them talking so that my brain can do the like slow autistic thing that it like actually gives me a chance to then say, okay, let's start with some assumptions and comments and drill through. So, you know, use it as a crutch anytime you need to stall for time, or if you, or, you know, for any of those things where it's like, tell me about the latest bug you solved. You know, there's always something stupid that you probably knocked out last Tuesday. So, and then, yeah, do I have any advice for screening potential managers, coworkers? I mean, a lot of it is, can they hold a conversation? Do they get excited about anything? I don't want to work with boring people. I have stopped the interview process early if I talk with engineers and they're not excited about what they're doing, if they seem really stressed out or just like don't have anything going on, because these are people that you're going to be spending 40 plus hours with. Like, I want to make sure we can like have some sort of vibe or connection about something. So yeah, tell me about what your day-to-day looks like. Even like tell me about like, I think my favorite question that I ask everyone is, what keeps you up at night? Like either as a team lead or a co-founder or an engineer. Is it technical? Is it cultural? Like, what are the biggest challenges kind of on your mind, and how can I help you resolve them? You know, so I like to get to know what people like, what irks them and drives them crazy, because that's where people get passionate, and that's where you can, you know, untangle the mess and solve problems and relieve tension.
Love it. Let's do 2 more minutes. There's that question about framing past projects as a junior and a mid-level, and then let's wrap.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get to own your own story about leveling. Titles are so made up and silly. I have been a technical architect. I've been a software engineer. I've been a, maybe we didn't even put it in writing, I don't know, and we'll re-level you in a few years. So it really is how you want to frame the story. So if you're applying to a mid-level or senior position, then you're going to frame it as a mid or senior level. Some of that is, I mean, I am such an anxious person. I lead with anxiety. So like on all of my past projects, what went wrong? Where was it slow? Where didn't we document? What like hit us in the face? What were the bugs? Kind of think through the things like leaky pipes. And then the great thing about past projects is you've usually got a list of all of those bugs. And then you can ask yourself, the senior thing to ask yourself is, how could we have prevented these things from happening? And so just from like going through that mental exercise and that retro, now you have a little bit more experience as a senior so that you can ask those questions up front. So like if you built an authentication system and you had XYZ problems, then in your next authentication project, you're going to lead with those questions with your project manager. Do we have enough time scoped for this? Do we have understanding of what level of observability we need? There's certain things like, how does it scale? How efficient is it? Is it usable? What's the testing requirements? A lot of seniority is just going through all of these questions and making sure we've got a plan or, someone on the team that we can delegate those things. You don't have to be the expert on all of them. You just have to be aware that there's, a process and a checklist, and that at some point we need to address it. And it's product's job to prioritize it. It's your job to bring it up and implement it.
You packed so much good advice into such a short window. That was amazing.
I can rant forever about this. This is my liberal arts talent. This is why you should all go to liberal arts school and fall in love with computer science.
So good. Thank you both so much.